For this Photoshop tutorial, we'll be taking two images, this background of a forest and these leaves on a white background, and turning them into some kind of design like this, using a bit of text and some overlays. So to get started, you'll need the forest photo and the leaves photo. Let's go to Photoshop. File, Open, and choose the forest image. Click the Open button, and we have our forest here. You'll notice that it immediately brings in a background layer on your layers palette. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to place some text onto this forest image. Let's go over to our text tool, or you can click T on your keyboard, and you'll notice that your mouse turns into the text tool. Let's just click once, and I'm going to type in forest. Now I want to change the font, so the way to do that is to click and drag, and I like dragging from the right side to the left. And I'm going to change my font to be Georgia. And I'll do bold italic. To accept these changes, hit the tick up the top. Now I'd like to change the size of this text and the position. So first let's go to my Move tool up on the top left of the tools. And now I'm able to move this text around. If for some reason you're not able to move it around, that might be because you have the background layer selected. Make sure to click on the forest text layer, and now you're free to move it around. There's two ways to change the size of your text. The first way is to use your text tool. Click once over your text, and you'll notice that you get the blinking cursor. Drag and highlight your text, and now go up to the top, and you can see that you can change the font size here. If you want something bigger and it's not in these options, just type into the text space, let's say 200, and hit return. And that will make your text a lot bigger. When you're happy with that, just hit the tick button again. Now let's move this to the middle using our Move tool. I still think I'd like that bigger, so I'll show you another way to change the size of your text without using the text tool. Make sure your text layer is selected down here on the layers. Then choose Edit, Free Transform, and you'll notice that you get this bounding box around your text with these small square handles at each point. To change the size, we want to grab one of the corners, hold down our Shift key, then click and drag. If you don't hold down your Shift key, you'll notice that you can stretch and squash your text. So make sure to hold Shift, and that will keep your proportions the same. We'll go about that big. Let's hit the tick button. Now you can see that there's a lot of space between my characters. This is something that you sometimes may want, or you may want to change. So let's change that. Using our text tool, we'll click once over our text, and highlight. And to make this change, you need to use the character palette. To make that visible, go up to Window, choose Character, and you'll see you have the character palette here. And the modifier you're looking for is this one with the V and A. We'll change this spacing to be 150 and hit Enter. And you'll notice that changes the gap between the letters. You can make it 0, and that's the standard spacing between the letters for the font, or you can make it something bigger, like 500. And that spaces out the letters evenly. I'll go for 150. And hit my tick button to accept the changes. I'll place my text right in the middle like that. To minimize the character palette, just hit these two arrows here once, and you'll see that it's over here in the stack. Now I don't want to use this text as it is. I want to use this text as a way to select a portion of the forest background. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to our forest layer where the text is, hold Command on Mac or Control on PC, and click on the T within the little square. You click once and you'll notice that you have the selection outline. The perimeter of a selection is indicated by these little animated dotting lines. If you want to deselect the selection you've made, go up to Select and click Deselect. So let's reselect it again. We'll hold down Command on Mac, Control on PC, click once on the T within the box, and we have our selection. Since we're not going to use the text, we just want to use a selection, we're able now to turn off the text layer. Click the little eye icon next to the forest text layer, and you'll see that it becomes invisible. But our selection is still active. So we'd like to move this selection around on our forest image to choose an area to copy. To do that, you have to go up to the Selection tool, which is the second one in the tool stack. Click once, And you'll notice that my mouse is now this crosshair. If I move my crosshair within the selection, it changes to an arrow with a square. Crosshair on the outside, arrow with a square on the inside. The arrow with the square on the inside indicates that you're within the selection. You can now click and drag and move this selection around. If you click anywhere outside, it will actually deselect. If you accidentally deselect, you can just go Edit, Undo Deselect, and it will bring back your selection. Or you're able to go over and Command or Control click your forest text layer. So we have our outline here. I'm going to move it down to about this spot here. So next I want to copy the forest background, but only copy the pixels that are within this selection of the text forest. First step is to choose the layer I want to copy from. So click on your background layer so it's highlighted. Now go up to Layer in your top menu, click New, Layer via Copy. On Mac, this is Command J. On PC, it's Control J. Click once, and you'll notice our selection has disappeared, but we now have a third layer in the layer stack. If you click the eye on your background, you can see that our selection of text has copied the forest background. Turn your forest layer back on, and now we're going to move this text. Use your Move tool. Make sure you've selected your text selection layer, which is now Layer 1, and then click and drag up, and you'll notice that our text appears. Now you can see the effect we were going for, using our text to select a portion of the background forest image. Let's rename our layer. To do that, double click on Layer 1, and I'm going to type in forest text and hit return. And now feel free to move your forest text wherever you'd like it. Lower on the image makes it more invisible, up a bit higher, where the fog is makes it a little bit more obvious. So I'm happy with that there. So let's do the next step. Let's go File, Open, and this time we'll choose the leaves file. We're going to select these leaves and bring them into our previous image. Now just watch as I do this next step. There's no need to do it. I'm going to be using it as an example. I'm going to use the Quick Selection tool here to select these leaves. And I'm going to use my Alt key to change it from a plus and minus to deselect these white areas. So we have our selection there. I'll go Edit, Copy. So now I've copied this section, and I'll click back on my forest image, and I'll go Edit, Paste. And you'll notice we have our leaves there, but you can see that the leaves look obvious that they've been cut out. Let's go back to our leaves file. We have a selection here, so let's deselect by going Select, Deselect. And the technique I'm going to use to select these leaves is using the color range. Go up to Select and click Color Range. You'll get this pop-up, and you'll notice that your mouse turns into a small eyedropper. Click somewhere on one of the green leaves once, and you'll notice that you get an almost X-ray image of the leaves here in this window. Where we clicked are represented by the whiter parts, and you can see that the background is black. White means that this is the area that Photoshop will select and focus on. If I click on the back white area, you'll see that now that's white, and the leaves are black. We want to choose the green of the leaves, so I'll click once more again on this part of the green leaf. And there's this fuzziness slider that you can change. If you slide it to the left, this will reduce the colors that Photoshop allows to be within the selection. So it chooses that green color and chooses colors that are close to that. If you slide it up to the right, you'll see that it's including more of the green, eventually including some of the background. So I'd like it somewhere in the middle, probably about there. You can see that we've got the main green, a little bit of a faded green here, and the background is black, so we won't have any of that. Click OK, and you can see that we have this really interesting selection here. Now this may look like something's gone wrong, but don't worry, Photoshop knows what it's doing. This is indicating that there are partial pixels or partial opacity of pixels being chosen. So now let's copy this section. Go Edit, Copy, and now let's return to our forest image. This time again, go Edit, Paste, and you'll see now if I use my Move tool that these new leaves have opacity. The previous leaves are solid cutouts. This opacity effect is something that we're looking for. It gives your image a bit more of a subtle effect and less like it's been cut out by hand. I don't want to keep this first leaf copy, so I'll delete that. I'll click on Layer 1 and hit my rubbish bin icon. and I'll click yes. I'll click on layer 2, and this time I'll double click and call it leaves. Using my move tool, I'll move these leaves up to the middle, and now they're a little bit big, so I'm going to shrink these down using the free transform option. Click on edit, free transform, and you'll see that we have this bounding box. Anywhere you can click and drag in the middle, but let's go to the corner, lower left, and remember to hold shift as you drag. Drag our leaves down, and then release shift, and you can click and drag and place your leaves over your forest background. That looks good there. I'll use the tick button to accept. And now, remembering what we did with the forest text, we're going to do the same with the leaves. Move your mouse over the center square, hold Command if you're on a Mac or Control if you're on PC, and click once. What that's done is Photoshop has chosen the pixels on this layer and made a selection. Let's hide that layer by hitting the eye. We want to copy this section from the forest background, so we need to choose our background by clicking once. And again, let's go Layer, New, Layer via Copy. You'll notice our selection has disappeared, but we also have a new layer. Let's double click on Layer 1 and call it Leaves Cutout. To check if this worked, use your Move tool, select your Leaves Cutout layer, and then move them away from the forest. And you can see that our leaves have now cut out the forest image, but they've done it in a very subtle way, with different strengths of the forest image being cut out. Now there's some parts of these leaves that have the sharp edge on them. I'm going to erase those just by hand. So let's go to the eraser tool. And if your eraser is too large, go up to the top, and you can hit this down arrow and change the size. Let's say 111, maybe a little bit smaller. 70 looks good. And you can choose hard round, which will give a crisp edge, or soft round, which will give a much softer edge. We'll use soft round. And take some time to erase. And if your eraser isn't strong, that might be because your opacity is down low. So go up to the top and change your opacity to be 100%. Now take some time to erase the leaves. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're going for a kind of subtle abstract effect here. I have two parts of the leaves, and I want one to be on the right side and one to be on the left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this layer so I have two copies of it. Click on Leaves Cutout Layer, and then hit your menu button and choose Duplicate Layer. I'll call this Leaves Cutout Right. And I'll change the first name to be Leaves Cutout Left. I'll move Leaves Cutout Left to be over to the side and choose Leaves Cutout Right and move that to the right. So now I'm going to spend some time erasing. On Leaves Cutout Right, I'm going to erase this whole section here. So now my leaf is on its own. Now let's go to Leaves Cutout Left, and I'll erase this leaf. Using my eraser, I'll erase this leaf. And using my Move tool, I have this leaf here. So now I have this leaf and this leaf separate on their own layers, and you can see them here in the layer stack. So the leaf on the left, let's move this down. And now I want to rotate this, and the way to do that is to use the Free Transform tool. Edit, Free Transform. I'm going to hold Shift and shrink it down a little bit. And before I hit the tick, you'll notice that your mouse turns to a curved arrow on the outside. That's so you can rotate your leaf. Click and drag within the square. And now you can just take some time to choose how you think it will look really good. I'm going to place mine about there. When I'm happy with that, I'll hit the tick button. And we'll do the same with this leaf on the right. Choose your Leaves Cutout Right layer. Select Edit, Free Transform. Hold Shift and click to drag on a corner to shrink, and then do some rotation by moving your mouse to the outside corner and rotating. Click and drag on the box in the middle. I'd like to make that a little bit bigger. And hit the tick when you're happy. And that looks really good. We've used our forest background as a backdrop and also as a texture that we use text and the images of the leaves to copy from and duplicate. Let's save this as a Photoshop file. Click File, Save As, and I'm going to call this Forest Poster. Make sure it's set to Photoshop and make sure Layers is ticked. Click Save and click OK. Your Photoshop file is saved, which means you have the option of coming in and changing the placement of all of your layers. Now let's also save this as a JPEG. Click File, Export, Export As, and you'll get a pop-up window. First, go to the top right and change the format. Change this to be JPEG, and you'll see here that our approximate file size will be 1.6 megabytes. You can change the quality down. Let's try 50%. Click on the screen to accept the changes, and you can see now that our file is going to be about half a megabyte. If you want to zoom up to check the quality, you can click down on the bottom, plus and minus, and you can click and drag within your image to change the placement. 50% looks really good. I'm going to hit Export All, and Photoshop now will ask you where to save your image. And Photoshop asks where you'd like to save this image. I'll call this Forest Poster Final. Save it in my same folder and click Save. Now let's minimize Photoshop. Here's our file, and we have our finished forest poster. For further experimentation with this technique, feel free to use other images and using the Color Range Selection tool, or Command or Control clicking the layer to choose the pixels of the layer. And this method is really good because it allows you to do some really creative and interesting effects with just a few steps.